let's make sure I don't have any syntax errors. So, God, I have way too many tabs open right now. Let me fix that problem first. So, closing tabs, close my Discord. Doesn't look like Josh has responded to me today. He's not having a good time. We could put... I got a tab with music. I'm gonna put that tab over here. Yeah, that way I can... I'm not trying to advertise what I'm listening to. It's just, I want to reduce the amount of clutter over here. Because I already have a timer and... You know what? Why don't we put this timer... Yeah, I mean, this timer is not very useful for people to be looking at. Especially when I sometimes get stuck with that screen open and you're looking at a goddamn timer and nothing useful. It'd be more useful just to be looking at, you know, what the result of our code is rather than a timer. So that way, if I accidentally leave the wrong window open, you know, at least you get something useful either way, instead of just, you know, a bullshit timer. And that also declutters things a bit for me. Okay, so timer's running. And let's refresh. Okay, so that looks like it's still good. I'm kind of paranoid now because we've successfully written code a few times without making any syntax errors. That makes me worried, so I'm just going to introduce the syntax error really quick, make absolutely sure that I'm running what I think I'm running. Okay, reference error. Yep. So just wanted to make sure there. And we can close this code now. You know what? I'm going to... I'm just going to make a note while I have it on my mind. I'm just going to make a note that new rec is how... This is how I'm writing my constructors for structs. And the reason I'm doing this is, right, I know I said camel case for functions and then snake case for variables. But the problem is that I'm breaking that rule because I want these names to all be the same. I want these tokens to be identical, right? So if I have something like, if I type it like new rec inc like that, then this token here doesn't match these tokens. And I'd like everything to be easy to see where visually see where those associations are, where those connections are. So that's why I am writing my constructors in that way. That kind of like breaks my convention. So there is a reason why I'm breaking my own rules. So if somebody types new rec inc like that, or new rec inc like that, but it's still lowercase, or new rec inc, God, there's tons of ways you could do this. Or new rec inc, or new rec inc. That's good enough for me. We'll correct them. And we'll also have a note of, like, what does this mean? Or do we really need that? Well, it's too late. I already typed it. New rec inc means. New rec inc means. Okay, so I just made a note right here, and oh boy, that is shit. How did I must have, sorry. I had the wrong windows open. Okay, so now that we have all that kind of like sorted and cataloged or whatnot, let's put this viewport rectangle where it belongs. Now, because these rectangles are they are more general than just needing to be in the graphics adapter. So I think they should be outside of the graphics adapter, but I'm like not sure here. Well, what does the graphics adapter currently house, right? It houses like the OpenGL specific code, but it also has like the GL object, like the GL context inside of that. And so part of me is like, oh, we should divide this up a little bit more, because now these objects aren't quite OpenGL specific, right? They're more generalized, so we should like put them in a different container or a different subsection of the container. But I don't want to overly containerize and overly nest things and overly categorize, because I've found that nothing good happens from overly nesting things. Some people like deeply nested structures, but it's my experience from having done a lot of deeply nested structures that it just becomes a lot more cognitive load, because then it's like, oh, you have like this rectangle VP0, okay, where is it in like your folder structure, right? You've created like a folder structure in code if you make these complicated nested structs, and then you got to figure out where it is. Well, if it's all top level or just one level deep, just oh yeah, it's in my objects.rectangle inc or rectangle VP1, right? It's much easier to find. Okay, so with all those considerations, I'm going to say it either goes completely top level in the data, or we can put it in the like graphics adapter. But it is plain old data, so we could put it in global data. That would be valid, or we could put it in global classes and put it inside of the adapter graphics. And let's take a look at what we got in adapter graphics. We got our different memory, our GPU variable controller, okay. Now, when I think about it, maybe not the. I guess the rectangles are used in graphics operations, and when I do make objects that take an adapter graphics as a parameter, I definitely want them to have everything they need. And the likelihood that something that takes an adapter graphics is also going to need those region rectangles, those inclusive rectangles, that's very high probability. So I don't want to be like, okay, this function takes an adapter graphics, but it also relies on these global objects. Okay, well, if that's the case, why take an adapter graphics at all? Why not just do everything with global objects, right? Yeah, that's another thought there, right? Like maybe with my other classes that take this adapter graphics, they could have just reached into the global state to get this, because there is only one of these. It's like a singleton at the moment. So, now I'm kind of questioning that design choice, but I think this is a decent design choice. But yeah, we're going to put the rectangles in here because I've given it some thought. And okay, so what we'll do is we'll say, we already know so we need VPC, which is the rec VP0 and rec VP1. No. Always size of canvas. This one is the dest/screen viewport. So destination slash, so this one is the destination slash screen viewport, viewport 0. And then this one is the source slash off screen viewport. Is that decent to stick with? Sure, that's good. Now I did say that when we do stuff with getting data to the GPU, like variables, specifically uniforms, I'm just going to use a giant texture to encode all of my uniforms. So I'm not actually going to use uniforms, I'm just going to use texture uploads, and different pixels in the texture correspond to different variables. So eventually I'm going to need some way to like upload this off-screen viewport, so some type of function that like encodes the 4 variables as pixel values and sets them somewhere on the texture. So I'll have to think about how that'll be done. But I think this is good for now. And I'm going to say these... So I'm just going to make a note of like where these are and the justification for why these rectangles are where they are. Rectangles. Thought about putting these in that. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to make a note of, I did consider putting these in global data, but after a lot of consideration, it just makes sense that they're here because something that takes an adapter graphics is probably, not all the time, but quite often, it's probably going to want one of these rectangles. So they should probably go here. Now, the next thing we can do is, we're going to refresh really quick. I want to initialize these as soon as possible. And right now I kind of like just keeping everything null, even though I could initialize them right now in here. So I'll just initialize them right here. So rec VPC equals new rec inc, like that. And we'll do it 3 times because we got these 3, and then you also have to prefix that with adapter graphics. So adapter graphics, and then these different pieces. Now that's kind of... You might not like that because this is a lot of extra code, right? Because we could have just replaced the null with this, and then that would mean that we didn't have to write this, and we didn't have to write that. So that's, we've kind of like doubled the amount of code to say the same thing. But the reason I write it this way is just for consistency with all these other nulls, and then also I have more space to like annotate with comments without going over my column limit. Okay, so we got that. Let's make sure that still runs. Make sure we don't have any syntax errors in our constructor or something, and that looks good. I'm going to go over to the new rectangle function really quick and put a use strict in there. So we could probably put it like right here. And we almost got away with it, but not quite. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go. Alright, so I'm just doing that so that I can more easily see that connection, even though there's now a space right here. There's space between this and that. I want to more easily see that connection and preserve that visual connection. So therefore I wrote that comment. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, we have these. They're all constructed with trap values. And what we could do is that's definitely, let's just do that. So we're gonna go in here and we're gonna say like dot rec vpc dot x0 equals, right? And so this is kind of right. There's 4 points. X. Do you want to do? Well, let's do general. Let's keep the general to specific going. So x's and then y's grouped together. 0, 1, and 0, 1. Sorry, this is also a lot of writing because if we just created the objects on the fly, like we did in the other code base. So if we look at that code, rec vp0. So you notice this is much cleaner, because we don't have to repeat the token vp0 like every single time we're addressing one of these properties. I do agree this is much cleaner, but I don't think it'll transcribe to C code as well. So I'm just gonna stick with this just because I'm gonna try not to create anonymous objects on the fly, unless they're wrapped in some type of constructor that formalizes what kind of object they are. So what we can do now is, right, and then we have VPC, VP0, and VP1. And we can have, might as well just line that all up. We can just, right here, we can just say populate viewport rectangles, right? Viewport, port, okay, so we're going to use V and R. Let's see how much time do I have. I got 1 minute. And going like 5 minutes over is okay. But we'll see if I've finished the thought or not. We're not quite finished. VP1, VP0, VPC. Once again, we can make sure client, dest, and this is source. So this is, well, actually they're both on GPU, right? Yeah, they're both on GPU, so I'm not gonna make a distinction between if it's GPU or CPU. It really depends. Okay, so now this, we do have, we go like gl.viewport, I believe. I know I manually set this somewhere. Okay, so we have manually set this. So the canvas width and the canvas height. So where is that canvas declared? Because if we... So it looks like we make this canvas We definitely make the canvas after we make the viewports, so we should probably address this hard coding here. Yeah, we'll address that hard coding. So rather than introduce a dependency where this has to be set after the canvas or vice versa, we'll make a constant in our globals that has like the initial dimensions of the client rectangle. So we'll do like global data dot initial rec VPC, like that, right? And then we can just take all of this, and obviously this is ugly stuff. But the point is that now in our global data object we can just define that, and it's we can put that into the initial. Oh, I see. Do I have like an initial object and then like an initial? So IRNI glodat for initial global data, initialize global data, and okay, so I think I screwed some stuff up. Okay, so these are definitely my starting values, and if I'm going to keep this initial value container because that's the way I've decided to do it, then we should just kind of keep that. So what we could do initial value dot initial, we could call it I do like calling it initial rec VPC, so it's not the exact same token. But we could just stutter it like this. That makes it redundant, right? Because it's initial value dot initial rec VPC, whatever. But it also makes it readable because it's initial value. Yeah, I don't know, man. Okay, well, at some point, we just gotta make a decision and kind of stick to it. For some reason, I'm kind of favoring these tokens, because if I make it the tokens exactly identical, like, if I call it, if I actually make like a rec VPC in here like this, there is a potential for me to start passing around rec VPC because it has the exact same structure, even though what it's supposed to mean is that it's the initial values for like setting up rec VPC. So there could be a lot of potential problems with that. So I'm going to say decided to write it listener instead of put a rec VPC zero because Another thing is we could, like, if this were C code, we could make these defines. Okay. So we want 0 and 512 and 0 and 512, and yeah, even though these are coincidentally the same value, they don't necessarily have to be, right? Like maybe eventually I want the viewport to be, you know, the size of this texture. So 0 to 512 and 0 to 512 on both axes. That's good. And let's refresh, make sure we didn't break anything. I feel like there might be something left in a broken state. Yes. And it's because I used equal symbols. So over here, I just changed them back to colons. I'm going to check that, make sure it still runs. And I am just breaking shit. So let's see what we got here. I need to stop recording and record another one.